Hello and welcome back to my series for International Women's Day, where I interview lots of different women about their experience and expertise. Today we're joined by Lucy, who is a coach. She works on artist development, she helps run the Lancaster Jazz Festival, she is a woman who does lots of amazing things, and she's come to talk to us a little bit about them. So yeah, I hope you really enjoy this one. I really enjoyed talking to her today. So here we go. Hi Lucy, thank you so much for coming on the series.
Hi, I'm really glad to be here.
I'm really excited. Because I saw that you'd started a new Instagram account for your coaching side of things. And Fergus, my partner, was like, "Oh, you got to follow her. She's going to be posting stuff you're interested in." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I went on, and it has been motivating me on a Monday morning with like, "Okay, what are you going to achieve this week?" I'm like, "What am I going to achieve this week?" So I was very excited to have you on as well, because you do a lot of stuff to do with women in the arts, and so I was like, "This is perfect for the International Women's Day series." So thank you so much for agreeing to come on. Apart from that little intro I've given you there, do you want to talk to the audience a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So my name's Lucy. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Alice, for having me on. I am, I guess, what we'd call a creative producer. I specialise in artist development work, so I do a lot of work with musicians. I specifically work in the music field, and I'm also a coach, as you pointed out. So those are the sort of three main areas of work. At the moment, I'm doing a role with the Jazz Promotion Network, where I'm the network manager, which means that I look after the membership and the organisation. And we run training and programs and generally try and be an advocate and a voice for the jazz sector within the UK music scene. We cover the whole of the UK and Ireland, so it's a pan-regional kind of programme that supports everyone who's getting involved in that. And I'm the festival director of Lancaster Jazz Festival, which is an annual festival that takes place in September, apart from last year. Should I not talk about this year? And it takes place in September every year, and is it's a celebration really of sort of the best of up and coming contemporary jazz in the heart of Lancaster. So that's great.
Yeah. And I know only anecdotally, because my partner also helps organise the Jazz Festival, or at least he's involved in the running of it. He's mentioned that you've been doing a lot of work to kind of ensure full representation when it comes to gender over the Jazz Festival. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the key issues when we talk about gender within music is role models and representation. I think if you look to as an audience member, if you look to an event and you're not seeing yourself represented in it, you're not going to feel like it's an open and welcome place for you to go. If you're an artist who's looking for new opportunities to perform your music, if you don't see yourself in the program, you're not going to feel like it's the kind of place that's going to want to program you. So I think a lot of representation is around role models and setting that sort of standard for openness, for people to feel like it's an opportunity or an event that's open to them. With the festival, I mean, there's a lot of programs that we do that try and look at encouraging everybody to take part, particularly in terms of gender balance. It's something that I think that we do in a way that is not sort of loud and outspoken, but it's just an inherent part of the way that we run our program. We have more female staff than we do male staff. We have a lot of female board members, and I think that comes across in it being sort of a natural balance when we approach programming, that we understand and we appreciate those artists, and we try and include that into the program. And I think that just helps to encourage them more female artists to apply, because they feel like it's a safe space for them to come and play.
Yeah, I think it's definitely things that we see sort of as the big festivals launch their lineups each year and things like that. People then Photoshop out all of the men, and then you see that there's like 3 female artists like headlining these huge festivals, and it's definitely something that's kind of being brought forward more and more. But it's kind of, yeah, I think if, like you say, if it's more ingrained into the ethos of how you run an event, then you obviously have to consider it, but you don't have to kind of make it an agenda item, because it's just part of what you do with everything else, which I think is is really vital. Do you find, because obviously you do lots of different types of music, you say music's your speciality, you do stuff outside music, but then within music, do you think there's a difference in how women behave in space is the wrong way of wording it, but how women are accepted into spaces between jazz and then other types of music? Do you think it's different in different types of music, or do you think it's all pretty consistent?
It's a really interesting question. When I started out working in music, I did a lot of work in rock and pop, kind of indie world, and yeah, I mean, I would say we're 10 years on now from that, and you know, the world has changed like greatly.
Thankfully.
Thankfully, in some ways, it's got a lot further to go, but we're getting somewhere. I would say that moving between those two worlds, yes, it's very different. Jazz is brilliant in that it's got a really nice sense of community. I think the artists are very supportive of each other. It's not competitive. Female artists, they come together and support each other's work. They collaborate. You know, they cheerlead for each other, and that's a great thing. And I think, you know, you find a lot in the sort of rock and pop and, you know, the pop industry in general, people who are put forward as these kind of idols or looked at for who they are as celebrities. Maybe they're a face to music, rather than in the jazz world you tend to find that musicians are inherently musicians at the heart, and that's the way that they're maybe looked upon as musicians. I hope looked upon as musicians first, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, I would say the jazz sector isn't perfect. There's definitely, you know, historically is led by organizations led by men. That's starting to change. You're definitely seeing like a winds change in programming, and that's not to say that men can't put together really great female-led programs, but it's the sea change that we're seeing. But I think that in that way there's less competition, there's a lot of support within the jazz sector, and I think that's a really positive thing for the female musicians that are working in that kind of arena.
That's really nice. And I think it's interesting that you mention sort of in pop music and sort of the music that we see in mainstream music, it's quite often, yeah, you might see sort of representation of like women and men and other genders, of course, but then you've also got, you know, behind the scenes, who's producing, who's recording, who's doing, you know, who's cleaning the studio, do you know what I mean? There's all these different roles associated with music that we don't first think, and you look at the statistics around that, and even if you have sort of like a female artist, their producing team might all be men, and then you've kind of got the sort of behind the scenes side of it. And it's, again, I'm from a technology background, I should say, not when it comes to music, but just computers in general. And so when you see those two things unioning, which is often around sort of production, that kind of thing, there's even more of a lack of women, or lack of women being supported, or they don't see people doing that role, so they don't then aspire to kind of go into that career. Have you had any experience of sort of supporting women who are wanting to take more of like a production role?
Yeah, it's really interesting. When I left school when I was 16, and I went to community college and I did music tech. So I'm not a musician. So
you're the perfect person to ask this to.
Yeah, I don't play any instruments. I'm not a musician, but music was always my passion. It was what, you know, I spent my time and my pocket money on, was going and buying singles and CDs and stuff and gig tickets. I tricked a few Manchester promoters into letting me into venues when I was a lot younger. So that was my passion, and so I went to college and I did music tech, and I did 2 courses. The first course, there was 35 people or something like that in the class, and there was two female students. And the second course, there was maybe 25, and there was 2 female students. And that's, I think, quite commonly representative of the, you know, the balance in that sector of the field. It's not something that you're encouraged to do at all. I mean, I was lucky, I was, you know, but it's not something that people see as maybe like a proper job.
Well, that's the arts in general, I guess, isn't it? People, yeah. And I'm definitely guilty of this as well. I think my mum did a degree in English literature, so she was always kind of going, do a like a course or do something that you can definitely step into a job at the end of. And so even though I loved music, I've always pursued it as like a hobby or as like a secondary job, because you kind of want that stability. So I'm definitely guilty of putting that on myself as well quite a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all had a crisis of confidence at some point in our career as musicians or working in the arts sector in general, and gone, you know, maybe it's time that I just go and get a job with a salary that's gonna,
And it doesn't help
you know
when
what I
the
mean?
government's also telling you that at the moment.
No, exactly. Let's all retrain.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I can't remember what I was talking about. I was talking about
Sorry, I interrupted you.
production. No, it's totally fine. And it, you know, it's a valid point. It's not it's not an appealing career when you're being told left, right, and centre that, you know, you should go away and get a proper job. Being in the arts is a proper job. So yeah, I had a lot of support to engage with music when I was younger, and my, you know, my parents were for it. So they supported me a lot with that as well. And but I think that balance that I was talking about with the when I was in education is quite prominent still in the industry, and that you don't see people in those, you know, you don't see gender representation in those back of house roles or the supporting roles like you're talking about. And it's really interesting. I think there's a lot around environment in that, you know, you have to be able to go into a male dominated space, to go into venues that, you know, are pretty grim, and late at night, and, you know, be prepared to take what comes with it. There's a lot of oh, do you need help carrying that, or I can do that, don't worry, you know, expectation that you're not there to work when you are. And that's definitely something that I went through at the start of my career, and I think has maybe made me a little bit hardened to it. I have a hard skin now than I maybe did back then, and there was definitely a point where I felt like it wasn't a world for me. You know, you get to a point where you do have that crisis, and you go, definitely. I don't know if this is an environment that I want to put myself in on a regular basis, because it doesn't feel very friendly and it doesn't feel very sort of productive for me. I think I was really lucky to meet people. I met a really brilliant female tour manager called Natalie, working in one of the venues that I did work with, and she was brilliant and toured with like loads of really great artists that I really respected. And she was someone that I came quite close friends with, and I'm still in touch with now. And I think that having that role model, having someone who just went, look, you can make it in this industry, it's hard work, but, you know, screw it. You're able to take that on. It's a challenge that you can overcome. And if you work hard and you're good at your job, and people will see that and they'll respect that, and it will kind of go from there. And it's kind of what I did. I hunkered down. I did a load of voluntary work in all over the place, and I would roll cables, and I would, you know, do all kinds of stuff in venues in the evenings, and support artists, and load stuff in and load stuff out, and drive wherever. And I did a lot of that, and it's not an opportunity that's available to everyone. I get that, but I put a lot of time into it, and I just became so comfortable in those spaces that it didn't really it felt like I had an ownership of them by that point. You know, I was in those venues so often, I knew all the people who were there, that barrier sort of broke down eventually for me. And then, you know, any new venue after that is just another version of somewhere you've been before, because generally they're all dark, slightly dirty boxes that you just go in and do the job in, and that's you know.
And I guess there's a couple of things to unpack there, in that, so before we were speaking about having female role models, or at least role models that you can relate to, whether you're a man, a woman, transgender, like non-binary, whoever you are, if you see someone that you can, that represents you, you're more likely to aspire to be that. So it's great that you had that experience. But then also on the flip side, you mentioned that, you know, I had to work that, I got the harder skin, and obviously that's great because you managed to do that, but also there's that thing in the back of your mind that still goes, but you shouldn't have to, like, you shouldn't have to have thick skin to go into this industry. You should want to be creative, and that's why you should be in this industry. So I think there's a couple of things there that was like, both great things, but also we shouldn't have to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it should make no difference who walks through that door. It really doesn't. And, you know, for me, it's interesting because you hear a lot about women in music and you know, about gender balance, and it's one of those things that kind of always irks me a little bit, because I'm not a woman working in music. I'm just a person working in music, and the work that I do should speak for itself, and it shouldn't be judged, you know, it shouldn't be judged on the basis that I'm a woman. It should be judged on the basis of the work that I do, and that's it. So it is really interesting. It shouldn't make a difference, and you shouldn't need to have a harder skin. I guess the reason that I say it is that I didn't have it when I started, and it's maybe it's a completely unhealthy thing to have built up, but it's you know.
Oh no, please don't think I was saying.
No, but it probably is. You know, I shouldn't have that kind of expectation that as soon as I walk into a place that it's going to be, I'm going to be treated differently. But
not that you shouldn't have to. Like, it's fine that you've developed that and that you've kind of grown into that person that maybe you were always going to be anyway. But it's the situation that sort of made you feel like that's where you got to where you are. I think is just, it's one that, again, it's we shouldn't have to have an International Women's Day, but until we have equality everywhere, we still need it. It still needs to be talked about, which I think is a really good point you've made.
No, you're totally right. I guess that the reason I think it's important to acknowledge that was my journey is that there's probably people who are going through the same experience of going, is this for me? And what I would say to them is, don't be afraid to be the bossy one, and don't be afraid to stand up for what it is that you need to be comfortable in that space, because you're fully entitled to it. And I think that when I say that I built up a thicker skin or a sort of harder exterior to live in that world, that's probably it was maybe a confidence thing. I'm unpacking this as we're talking. This is great.
It's therapy for you now.
Yeah, it's a little bit, isn't it? Maybe that's what it was. Maybe building up that, what I view as a thicker skin, was just having the confidence to stand up for what it was that I needed to be in that space. And maybe, you know, or maybe be accepting of what my boundaries were in terms of what I would take before I would go, no, hold on a second, like, you're pushing this too far. And that maybe is, you know, you have to accept that, and you have to accept that, and you have to stand up for it, but that's not an easy thing to do all the time.
It's definitely a skill that you have to develop, which I guess brings on to what you do now, which is sort of helping people. I know you help everyone regardless of gender, but you take that experience and you sort of help others. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you kind of do with that? And also, you've offered to give away a couple of coaching sessions as well for everyone watching this, so we'll leave details of that in the description. But do you want to talk a little bit more about the coaching that you do?
Yeah, I can do. So I trained as a coach. I think I've done a lot of artist development work. I've done that for maybe 8 or 9 years now, and those issues of kind of confidence and building up boundaries and knowing what your choices are and what you want to do, when there's a lot of the industry that's telling you this is what you should do and this is the path that you should take, and this is what's going to equal success. If you follow this journey, then you're going to be a successful artist. Doesn't chime quite right with me. Like, if you, like you were saying before, you come into music to be creative, you come into music to be, you know, immersed in this world that is creative, and it is sort of flexible, and, you know, it doesn't feel right to me that you would define your creativity by a scheme that someone else has devised, or by a path that someone else has sort of suggested for you. So I think what I love about coaching is it's about being supportive, but it's also about challenging someone's thinking. So if you are stuck on a problem, or let's say you don't know, you want to find a better balance in your work life, or you want to spend more time working with creative projects and less time on, you know, functions or non-creative projects, or you're trying to balance something in your life, coaching can be really helpful to challenge your thinking and help you to look at what the alternatives are. And so you can find a way that helps you to define this is what I want to do. And I think quite often a lot of us know deep down what it is that we want to do. We know deep down what the ideal outcome is. You know, if you say to yourself, how would I love my life to look in a year's time, and what are the changes that I can make to get there? Quite a lot of us, we know the first part, we know what we want it to look like, but it's the changes that we're going to make that get us there that are maybe a little bit more challenging, or we don't really want to accept them, because it might be a little bit like hard work, or we might have to make some compromises, or
it could be that you don't
we
know
might
the
not have the
industry,
confidence.
or like, so
Yeah.
for me, like, there's often times where I'm like, okay, I want to do this, but I don't know like how you go about doing that, if that makes sense, because you've not got anyone to talk, like anyone who's ever told you, okay, like you say, you're told this one narrative of, okay, if you want to be a musician, you play gigs, you get noticed, you get signed, that's it. And it's kind of, that's the narrative that you're taught if you want to make it as like an artist. But like you say, there's so many different ways of being an independent musician, or, you know, there's lots of different routes you can take, which I think is the thing that resonates with me, at least. I think is a really interesting thing to mention.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, it's a challenge sometimes trying to decipher which one of those is the right path for you, or which one is going to move you to the next step. Or and I you know, I think there is no right path. Like I was saying before, it's a bit of a kind of snakes and ladders kind of journey.
Yeah.
I've definitely been on that. You know, you feel like you're doing better, and then some project falls through, or something goes wrong, or so yeah, the great thing about coaching is it helps you to challenge your thinking. It helps you to think about what's the right path for you. So, you know, you can explore all the different options. Think about what the right path for you is. Think about what's going to get you to that ideal outcome. And how. So there's, you know, there's a lot of actions based within it. It's okay, what's the first step that you're going to take? And that first step can be, usually is something quite small, but it's the first step on you actually accepting and going, I'm going to make this change. And that's quite a big thing. And I think especially for like musicians who quite often don't give a lot of time, you know, to their thinking about the future, or what's going to happen next, or where they want to go to, because it's such a busy life.
Yeah.
You know, you're on the road, you're in the studio, you're writing new music, you're rehearsing, on, you know, it's hectic.
Or you're doing it around a more stable career, and so you're kind of you're juggling then as well. So yeah, definitely, it's
absolutely.
that state, that taking that time and that space to go, okay, what am I actually doing with this?
Yeah, and where do I want to be, and is the path that I'm on the right one for me, and is it making me happy, or am I doing it because there's a nice shiny organization that's offering me this project, or there's a funding bid here that says if I do this, then you know, it's not being defined. I think for me, what I'm excited about using coaching for is to help people to define what it is that they want, rather than being defined by some of the things that are around us and we're being told is the right thing. It's about being really confident and comfortable in the choices that you're making to define what's best for you. And that's what I'm really interested in about it. And I think that, yeah, for musicians, or those of us who are working in the creative industries, that it is stressful and it is hectic, and it is, you know, it's all go most of the time. Just taking that hour or so, you know, every now and again, just to think about that is quite important.
Yeah, and I think that's a great note to end on. I think that sort of redefining of what you think your career is going to look like and how you can get there, I think is a brilliant thing to do. So yeah, make sure that if you are interested in some coaching sessions with Lucy, you check out the rules for the giveaway in the description. And thank you so much for coming on, Lucy. This has been really great. I could talk to you for hours. I think we started before we hit record that we're going to go on so many tangents here because we can, but I think we've done quite well. I think we've done quite well at sticking. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciated it.
Oh no, it's been a pleasure, and it's, like I say, it's been like a little coaching session for me, just unpacking some of those things that I experienced when I was starting out in my career. It's really interesting. So